display. You did it it's beautiful. And thank you for taking the time. I know you all are busy and quilters as well, so you're taking time out of your quilting schedules to do this, and I appreciate that, sharing it with everybody. I grew up in Missouri. My mom had, well, there were 5 of us, and my mom did all the sewing. She made all of our clothes, and she would quilt. But she didn't actually make the whole quilt. What she would do is she would do like 6 or 8 of the blocks, and it's the old embroidery blocks, and usually they would be wreaths or flower themed. They'd pick a color like maybe pinks or blues or yellows. She would make all the quilt blocks. She would piece the top together. Usually it was just with sashing between the blocks, maybe some cornerstones, and then the wide borders. You've all seen them, probably on your grandmother or great-grandmother's bed. She would then, after my grandmother would cook Christmas dinner in the big dining room, her sons would take the dining room table down. It would go upstairs to the bedroom in the farmhouse. That would leave the whole dining room. The quilt frame would then come down from the attic, and the quilt would go up. They would quilt, her and all of her lady friends, gray-haired friends, would quilt then all winter long because there was no gardening. You couldn't really do anything outside. In Missouri, it was freezing cold. So they would quilt all winter long. Before Easter Sunday, the boys would come back, the quilt frame would go back up to the attic, and the dining room table would come back down. Anybody else know that story? Okay. How many of you ladies got stuck because you were crawling under the quilt when you were visiting grandmother? Me. I also would actually sit and quilt, and I'm sure as soon as I left, grandmother would go back and she would pull my stitches back out because they would be about this long. So, but that's where I first learned to quilt, was from my mom and my grandmother. So, of course, when I was, 6 or 7 years old, this is the very first quilt that I made. I still have it.
Oh, wow.
So if you're familiar with, if you've ever walked through and you see Aunt Martha, the little iron-on patterns, that's probably what these are from, is Aunt Martha.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So,
Wow.
the little kittens and stuff. But so I did the embroidery. I probably did not piece it together. I may have, I don't remember, and my mom has passed away. But anyway, you can pass it around. There's nothing left to it. There's really like no batting like in today. There might be another layer of fabric in there, and then just the and of course there's no binding. You pulled the back around the front, but you can pass it around. It's fine.
It's wonderful. You
So,
still have it.
I still have it. There's a couple other ones that I have, but I know those are the first blocks that I remember doing. So, and we would go through my mom's scrap fabric and we would sew. Never realized how blessed I was. I learned to sew on a Singer featherweight, a little black one. I still have it. My girlfriend actually was retiring and wanted to get rid of hers. I bought hers. So I have 2 of them now. I have my grandmother's treadle sewing machine, and one of the reasons why I have it is because it was the one thing that conquered my mother. Nothing in this life. She could raise 5 kids. She went through everything. We all had chicken pox at the same time, everything. Yet she could not master this treadle machine. She could not do the hands and the feet at the same time. I remember my dad sitting there doing the treadle and my mom doing, if we had to stop over at grandma's and have something, it was the best thing ever. So, yes, I have sewed my finger on my sewing machine. I have not cut off any appendages with the rotary cutter yet, though, so I'm blessed in that respect. But no, I quilted for, I did the embroidery, and if you kind of notice, this is probably one of my last pieces that I've done that is completely finished, and I've kind of gone back to the embroidery. So I've kind of come full circle. The blue and white one took me probably 10 years to do, the snowmen, the snow scene or whatever. I don't recommend hand embroidering with metallic thread. Unless you want to end up like a sailor after about 30 minutes. I'm trying to think what else. Life kind of got in the way and I did get away from quilting. And then when I was in Pennsylvania, I decided I needed to go back and find myself. So I found a quilt shop called Ladyfinger Sewing Studio. It's in Ole. And I went in with about 4 of my quilts and I said, are you interested in hiring anybody? This is some of the work that I've done. Never really been in sales a whole lot, but I'm very passionate about getting back into it. And she hired me on the spot. she also hired me to teach some classes there, just basic quilting, quarter inch seam and stuff like that. So that's where I really got back into it. I was able to make or produce a lot of quilts in a short period of time because the shop owner also designed fabrics for Andover Fabrics. So you all know what Quilt Market is. All the samples that are in the booth, those are made like within a matter of weeks, literally. Because the fabric comes off the production line, which I never knew. They are getting first and second runs immediately. They're not the finished runs a lot of times that end up in the shop that for sale. We make the samples and they immediately get shipped off to Quilt Market, whether they take them themselves to Houston, Paducah, or around the world. So I've had quilts that have been around the world, but I have not. So I've always wanted to escort them. I have not been allowed to. So I'm trying to think if there was anyone, a couple of them, the Andover Fabrics actually bought from me, so they have them. I don't have them anymore. But all the other quilts, unless I gave them as a gift to somebody, you're seeing them on the wall. I do still have some at home, and I have lots of projects.
It wouldn't fit in my car.
I can think more, but Tom had to study.
My house is well insulated with quilts, but I don't know, I want people to, from the exhibit, I hope you find something that you haven't maybe tried before, like a technique, and maybe it'll inspire you to try a different technique that you might like more, or a certain colorway, whether it's something like more monochromatic or something that's really bright and cheerful like the pineapple quilt, to try. The pineapple is paper pieced. I've never done that before. It's not for me. I will never go back. I know ladies that's all they'll do, and they love it.
What is paper pieced? Because I'm the non-quilter.
Paper piecing.
I don't quilt either.
Okay, so paper piecing is basically, it's a block that's printed on a piece of paper, literally. And you lay your fabric on top of it, and then you lay your other fabric on top, and you sew on the line. And I used to call it piecing for dummies. Because basically you sew on the line. You sew on the line, and you build your block, and then you unfold it, and then you lay your next piece right sides together, and you sew on the line, on the paper. But then whenever you're done with the block, you have to flip it over and rip all the paper off the back. Then you sew your blocks together, and then you make your quilt top. And there's many different designs, and they're very beautiful. It's not a technique that I enjoy, but I wanted to try it, and I did it.
So which one is that one?
That's the pineapple block. It looks literally like pineapples. That's why they call it the pineapple block. It's straight back. It's the gold diamonds, and then the colored and the white between it. That's a pineapple block.
Got it.
Yeah, right. I can see it plain as day. That's why I brought my attention to it. I've worked with large print fabrics, which I don't care for. I tend to like more of the batik. Themed quilts are okay. They're okay to work with. But this I like. This because you can put your own spin on it. I think your own creative juices really shine. Same way with the blue and white one. I think you can be a lot more creative when you do something that's a little more open like that. So, has anybody done mixed techniques, or do you all like to do just piecing, or the quilters that are in here?
I've done mixed techniques.
Do you have a favorite that you keep going back to, or?
I like the piecing for dummies, what can I say?
You like the paper piecing? A lot of ladies do. A lot of ladies do.
Accuracy.
She's honest.
Trouble with
Yeah, she's honest.
Yeah.
And it's really good for small little pieces too.
Yeah, you can get really, yes, very true.
She likes accuracy.
Yes, yeah.
We like her accuracy.
The seam ripper is my friend. I have 3 of them. Yes. And I don't mind unsewing anything. My design wall is my floor. So if you walk into my house and there's a quilt that's unfinished on the floor, it's probably because I'm working on it. Kind of like when you guys were talking about displaying the quilt. It's like, it looks good there, but no, I need something. This one looked better there. Yeah, same thing whenever you're piecing and stuff. So, but yeah.
So did you design this quilt, the fishing one?
No, this is Meg Hockley of Crabapple Hill Studios. She did this one, and believe it or not, the blue and white, the snow scene is hers. And she has, the one I'm working on right now that is hers is Noah's Ark. So it'll have, it's got the big arc, and then the animals come down through the quilt. So, and then she does, the blocks are intertwined in between the pattern. And then you can actually, you start out with the darker colors first, around your edges and shading, which I'm not like an artist or drawer, so it's, you really have to kind of watch the shading. And then they make like a color extender, Jackards makes a color extender, and I can give you guys the information if you want more information on it. And you basically, it's like a sealer over it. And then you let it dry, and then you iron it, and that kind of sets it, and then you can stitch over it. And then you just hand embroider it, or you can do whatever you want with it. So, but that's how you can get your own colors on it.
So you did the painting first and then stitched?
Yes, yeah, you do the coloring first, yeah. Noah's Ark will be the same, Noah's Ark will be colored, yes, and then stitched. So, I also like to do, there is beads and sequins on here.
Yes.
And then I do have some, believe it or not, the metallic thread that you see is machine thread. Don't be afraid to mix and match your threads, especially if you're doing a more art quilt. If you're doing a utilitarian quilt, I'd probably stick with more cottons. If you're on the cotton fabric, stick with cotton threads. But it's fun to mix up your threads, just to give it more interest, so.
Which of these is your favorite?
The blue one.
Mm.
That one I could have sold 10 times over. And
Oh,
the
sure.
blue, I don't know. It's just something about that blue, and then I did, traditionally, whenever I was taught to embroider, it's 3 strands of embroidery floss. Now I'm using 1 and 2 strands, and I'm mixing the colors. That's the other thing that I challenged myself on. I don't know if it's on this one or if it's on Noah's Ark. A couple of colors and create your own interest. I think I might have on the brown. I think the brown has 2 different shades of brown in here, in some of it. Because there's only so many colors of brown. So.
What did the designer call the,
Snow days.
snow days? We called it Silent Night.
Very fitting.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
Very fitting.
That's good.
And I wondered now that it's done, if I would do it in red or do it in black or another color, if it would be as interesting. I don't know. It'd be, it's a lot of
It would be out of the
time.
box.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the sample, hers on the quilt, the pattern that I bought is brown. She did it in browns and tans, and I thought,
I know, the silver and the blue, yeah.
Blue.
I
Yeah.
think it's just so soothing, and the blue is almost like, you think of that when you're looking at the snow.
the
you know?
snowflakes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
a winter's night. And then the glistening of the snow is why I add the silver.
Yeah.
Did anybody find the one thing that's odd on the whole entire quilt? There's one little thing on the entire quilt. There's a little red bead.
Rudolph.
Now y'all are gonna have to look at that, aren't you?
Yeah.
See if you can find the little red bead. Yeah, there's a little red bead on the quilt. Every once in a while, somebody will mention, did you know you have a red bead on there? I'm like, yeah, I put it there.
No, it's snuck on there.
So what, was that in honor of the Amish, tradition, or was that in honor of Rudolph, or was that in honor of, you just wanted somebody to do it?
It's actually, I think where it's at, it reminds me of a little bird in a bush.
Ah.
So it's, and cardinals are my favorite, so it's a little red cardinal in the bush, is kind of what it symbolizes. But yeah, if you, and I, quilting in Pennsylvania, the Amish, there's always one mistake in every quilt.
Right.
Well, I put one there whether I intend to or not. I hate to tell you, but there's one in there whether I meant to put it there or not. And it's like the bride on wedding day, she wants everything to be perfect, and guess what? She's the only one that knows that something's out of place, nobody else knows. Same way with the quilt, nobody else knows that that one stitch isn't supposed to be there, or that one color, so. No, we're all human, and that's the fun of it, I think. But I just like creating them. I don't do it for money, I don't do it for, it's for love. And it reminds me of, I know you guys probably don't know, but I lost my mom when I was 20 and my dad 9 months later when I was 21. So it reminds me, it takes me back to that, to to how they, how my mom taught me, you know, that it's okay to create things and be creative and to do things like that, so, yeah. So it reminds me of that. It's very peaceful and calming to me, so.
So what's your next adventure? What do you wanna try that you haven't tried yet?
I saw a video on, what's it called? And I'm gonna mispronounce it. It's Hardanger, Hardanger. So, yeah. It's basically, it's stitching on like an Aida cloth, which is like a gridded cloth, like counted cross stitch. But you cut away some of the fabric. So, and you're a sewer, it's kind of like, the wing needles that have, and when you do so it would be similar to that. So I don't know, I might try that eventually. I have so many projects in my head, I will never live long enough. Same way with my stash, I will never finish my entire stash or my projects that I have that I wanna do. So, but no, I just enjoy it, you know, Carl always knows where I'm at. If he can't find me, I'm in front of my sewing machine, or in the, you know, my closet getting something out.
Hiding in the stash room, I go back in the corner, there she is.
Yeah. So I'm either one of the two places usually, yeah. When you guys go shopping and you find a piece of fabric, do you buy it, or do you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And how many yards do you buy?
5.
Do you buy 5? Well, you make clothes. That's a lot for a quilt unless you're buying the backing. Yeah. I mean, I have at least 2 yards of, if I like a fabric, I have at least 2 yards of it. And then sometimes I get mad that I don't have enough.
So when you find fabric that you like, do you see the quilt in your head?
No,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Just like the fabric.
You just
So
like
you
it.
see the outfit in your head?
I just
do.
like the fabric, and with 5 yards, I can do a jacket and a pair of pants.
I see the
Or
outfit.
something.
You see, okay.
I see the outfit, yes.
I'll see like a style of quilt, but I won't see a quilt. And another lady that I was blessed to meet was Jane Blair, and when I met her, I am not gonna do her any justice, but she stopped entering quilting contests for these major quilt shows because she would automatically win. She would win every year, so she stopped entering. She lived in Pennsylvania, not far from us, and we did a display of her quilts, and they were beyond stunning. Come to find out, when I talked with her, I was in awe, but her husband was a color for PPG, so he did a lot of color and all that stuff, and he taught her color and to think outside the box. And she will actually go into a quilt store, and not only will she look at the front of the fabric, she will flip it over and look at the back of the fabric. And later, whenever I went up and looked at her display and looked at her quilts, if you look at the fabric close enough, she's actually used the back of the fabric instead of the front of the fabric in her quilts.
Wow.
Which is just, you know, you learn something from everybody, it's everywhere. And I love whenever I'm on social media and I see somebody takes a picture of their floor and go, look at that quilt, and it's the floor tile. And it's like, yes, that's where we get our quilt patterns from, they're everywhere, you know, they're everywhere, so, but anyway. So, does anybody else have any questions? But I have 3 quilt tops to quilt yet. I have Noah's Ark that I'm working on. I have 2 other ones that I need to put the tops together on. And then I have 2 other ones that are started. So I have, 6 or 8 already, projects that are just constantly going.
After our own heart.
Yes.
Well, I have a job for the last 14 years where I sit on my butt all day. And that's how I was able to finish the blue and white quilt. Because when I lived in Pennsylvania, I work from home. I work in like a call center, so I work from home. And I'm able to, in between phone calls, stitch. Or if I'm on hold, I'm stitching. So I'm blessed that I'm able to work while I'm doing it. So that's why I think I do a lot more handwork lately. That, and I have so many large quilts. I've only got 2 beds in my house. I can't put any more any more quilts on my bed. So, and I only hang 1 or 2 of them. Well, no, there's 3 or 4 hanging in my house. I guess there's 2 behind my sewing and then 1 in the other room. So there's usually only 3 or 4 that are hung up in the house, so, yeah.
I do have a question.
Sure.
You said you had sent your quilts around the world, do you ever get fabrics from other countries?
Not really. I mean, fabric is made all around the world. Gail taught me like what they call it, the blank, the white, you know, and then that is, and there's actually certain different grades of it too, which I've learned, through the years. A lot of, the softer the fabric is, the tighter the cotton is, and of course the ink sets on top of the cotton fabric, where batiks, it goes all the way through, the dye is different. So the batik, on some of those blocks, I probably have the back of the fabric showing, because you can't tell. But I also don't recommend trying to hand quilt a batik fabric, because of the finish that they put on it, you will break your needle, you'll break your finger trying to get the needle through it. It's just the way the fabric is. I like the cotton fabrics, and most of the fabrics that come from around the world, the designers are all over the world. But we did have some fabric that was Japanese and Oriental in the quilt shop, but it didn't draw my interest to it. I didn't. It's just not something. I did the one Hawaiian table runner, and that was a display for the quilt shop. It wasn't anything that I would like. I like more fabrics like the blue and white one, or this batik. That's more my style, yeah. But I'll think outside the box, I'll do whatever, so I just do. These I bought, this was fun, I got to shop for the fishing fabric, and actually I had the fishing fabric before I bought the patterns. But I wasn't sure what I was gonna do with it. But I liked the line of fabric, so I bought it, because I fish, so I bought it. And I have enough to make a second one if I want to take the time to do the blocks. But once I've done something, I tend to want to do something else. I tend not to want to do the same thing over and over. So, yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say, we appreciate your work.
Yeah, thank you.